unless it be a little maiden whom I saved from starving. A little Cornish girl she is, and shaped in western manner, not so very much less in width than if you take her lengthwise. Her father seems to have been a miner, a Cornishman, as she declares, of more than average excellence, and better than any two men to be found in Devonshire, or any four in Somerset. Very few things can have been beyond his power of performance, and yet he left his daughter to starve upon a peat rick. She does not know how this was done, and looks upon it as a mystery, the meaning of which will some day be clear, and redound to her father's honour. His name was Simon Carfax, and he came as the captain of a gang from one of the Cornish stannaries. Gwenny Carfax, my young maid, well remembers how her father was brought up from Cornwall. Her mother had been buried just a week or so before, and he was sad about it, and had been off his work, and was ready for another job. Then people came to him by night and said that he must want a change, and everybody lost their wives, and work was the way to mend it. So what with grief and overthought and the inside of a square bottle, Gwenny says they brought him off to become a mighty captain, and choose the country round. The last she saw of him was this, that he went down a ladder somewhere on the wilds of Exmoor, leaving her with bread and cheese, and his travelling hat to see to, and from that day to this he never came above the ground again, so far as we can hear of. But Gwenny, holding to his hat, and having eaten the bread and cheese, when he came no more to help her, dwelt 3 days near the mouth of the hole, and then it was closed over the while that she was sleeping. With weakness and with want of food she lost herself distressfully, and went away for miles or more, and lay upon a peat rick, to die before the ravens. That very day I chanced to return from Aunt Sabina's dying place, for she would not die in Glen Doone, she said, lest the angels feared to come for her, and so she was taken to a cottage in a lonely valley. I was allowed to visit her, for even we durst not refuse the wishes of the dying, and if a priest had been desired, we should have made bold with him. Returning very sorrowful, and caring now for nothing, I found this little stray thing lying, her arms upon her, and not a sign of life, except the way that she was biting. Black root stuff was in her mouth, and a piece of dirty sheep's wool, and at her feet an old egg-shell of some bird of the moorland. I tried to raise her, but she was too square and heavy for me, and so I put food in her mouth, and left her to do right with it. And this she did in a little time, for the victuals were very choice and rare, being what I had taken over to tempt poor Aunt Sabina. Gwenny ate them without delay, and then was ready to eat the basket and the ware that contained them. Gwenny took me for an angel, though I am little like one, as you see, Master Ridd, and she followed me, expecting that I would open wings and fly when we came to any difficulty. I brought her home with me, so far as this can be a home, and she made herself my sole attendant without so much as asking me. She has beaten 2 or 3 other girls, who used to wait upon me, until they are afraid to come near the house of my grandfather. She seems to have no kind of fear even of our roughest men, and yet she looks with reverence and awe upon the counsellor. As for the wickedness and theft and revelry around her, she says it is no concern of hers, and they know their own business best. By this way of regarding men she has won upon our riders, so that she is almost free from all control of place and season, and is allowed to pass where none even of the youths may go. Being so wide and short and flat, she has none to pay her compliments, and, were there any, she would scorn them, as not being Cornishmen. Sometimes she wanders far, by moonlight, on the moors and up the rivers, to give her father, as she says, another chance of finding her, and she comes back not a whit defeated, or discouraged, or depressed, but confident that he is only waiting for the proper time. Herein she sets me good example of a patience and contentment hard for me to imitate. Oftentimes I am vexed by things I cannot meddle with, yet which cannot be kept from me, that I am at the point of flying from this dreadful valley, and risking all that can betide me in the unknown outer world. If it were not for my grandfather, I would have done so long ago. But I cannot bear that he should die with no gentle hand to comfort him, and I fear to think of the conflict that must ensue for the government, if there be a disputed succession. Ah me, we are to be pitied greatly, rather than condemned, by people whose things we have taken from them. For I have read, and seem almost to understand about it, that there are places on the earth where gentle peace, and love of home, and knowledge of one's neighbors prevail, and are, with reason, looked for as the usual state of things. There honest folk may go to work in the glory of the sunrise, with hope of coming home again quite safe in the quiet evening, and finding all their children. And even in the darkness they have no fear of lying down and dropping off to slumber, and hearken to the wind of night, not as to an enemy trying to find entrance, but a friend who comes to tell the value of their comfort. Of all this golden ease I hear, but never saw the like of it, and haply I shall never do so, being born to turbulence. Once indeed I had the offer of escape, and kinsman's aid, and high place in the gay bright world, and yet I was not tempted much, or, at least, dared not to trust it. And it ended very sadly, so dreadfully that I even shrink from telling you about it, for that one terror changed my life, in a moment, at a blow, from childhood and from thoughts of play and commune with the flowers and trees, to a sense of death and darkness, and a heavy weight of earth. Be content now, Master Ridd, ask me nothing more about it, so your sleep be sounder. But I, John Ridd, being young and new, and very fond of hearing things to make my blood to tingle, had no more of manners than to urge poor Lorna onwards, hoping, perhaps, in depth of heart, that she might have to hold by me, when the worst came to the worst of it. Therefore she went on again. End of chapter 20. Recording by Michelle Harris.